on the offense end of the floor made you go late to the shot clock. Was that something they were doing, or was that, like you mentioned earlier, that you guys came out a little bit flat, or a combination of both?
Yeah, I mean, I think our first trend.
In the echoing gymnasium of West Des Moines Community Center on a bitterly cold February morning in 1999, a 5-year-old girl named Brent Clark stood at the free throw line, her small frame dwarfed by the boys around her, as her father Brent watched from the wooden bleachers with a heart that seemed to beat in time with every bounce of the ball. It was one of those seemingly ordinary moments that would later reveal itself to be a quiet genesis, a seed of courage planted in the soft soil of childhood that would, over decades, bloom into something that reshaped the very landscape of women's basketball. Brent knew instinctively that this day could either shatter his daughter's confidence or forge in her the kind of inner resilience that greatness is built upon. What no one realized then was that his whispered words before that game would not just prepare Caitlin for competition, but would become the philosophy underpinning her entire approach to life, a way of meeting fear not with retreat, but with resolve. The decision to let Caitlin play in the boys' league had not come easily. Brent and Anne had spent nights talking by the kitchen table, coffee growing cold as they weighed the risks of putting their daughter against boys who were older, stronger, and faster. There was no girls' league for her age group in West Des Moines, and to deny her the chance to play felt almost cruel when her passion was already blazing with a precocious intensity. Sometimes the hardest choices parents make are the ones that terrify them, the ones that require not blind faith in their child's talent, but trust in their ability to get up after falling, to keep trying when the world tells them they don't belong. The night before the game, Brent had found Caitlin in the backyard beneath the dim glow of the porch lamp, shooting basket after basket into the cold Iowa air, her breath visible with each exhale, her tiny figure framed against the frozen stillness of the night. "Daddy," she said, her voice trembling. "What if the boys are too big? What if they don't want me on their team?" Brent knelt beside her, his hands resting gently on her small shoulders, and for a moment he saw not just his little girl, but the woman she might one day become. "Caitlin," he said quietly, "tomorrow, some people might look at you and think you don't belong on that court, but you do. You've earned your place there. Your heart is just as big, your dreams are just as important, and your courage is just as real as anyone else's." At 5 years old, she couldn't possibly grasp the weight of those words, yet they sank deep, like roots waiting for time and experience to coax them into strength. When morning came, the world was wrapped in frost and silence. As Brent drove through the gray winter streets toward the community center, Caitlin sat in the back seat clutching her basketball as if it were a talisman. "I'm scared, Daddy," she whispered when they parked and saw the crowd of boys pouring in with their parents, tall and confident, their laughter filling the air. Brent turned to her with a calmness that masked his own nerves. "It's all right to be scared," he said. "Being scared just means this matters to you. But don't let that feeling stop you. Remember, you're not here to prove you're as good as the boys. You're here to prove you're as good as you can be. That's something no one can take from you." Those words would echo through every victory and defeat of Caitlin's journey. From the icy floor of that small-town gymnasium to the roaring arenas of the NCAA and eventually the WNBA, where her name would become synonymous with fearlessness and possibility. Inside the gym, the smell of polished wood and popcorn filled the air. Parents gathered on the bleachers, chatting and pretending not to notice the tension that came with the novelty of a little girl joining an all-boys league. When Caitlin walked in with her hair in pigtails and her oversized jersey hanging loosely from her shoulders, conversations hushed. Eyes followed her. A few boys snickered, making quiet jokes about girls not belonging in basketball, while some adults exchanged uncertain looks, unsure whether this experiment in inclusion would end in triumph or tears. But Caitlin, hearing her father's voice in her mind, took a deep breath and walked onto the court with the same poise that would one day make her a household name. As the whistle blew and the first pass came her way, something changed. Her movements, instinctive and fluid, silenced the doubts around her. She dribbled with confidence, passed with precision, and when the ball came back to her at the top of the key, she shot without hesitation. The gym fell quiet for half a second as the ball arced through the air and dropped cleanly through the net. That sound, the soft swish that followed, was more than just the mark of 2 points. It was the sound of a boundary breaking, of history quietly rewriting itself in the hands of a child who refused to see limits. Brent, from the stands, felt tears sting his eyes. It wasn't about the shot or even the game. It was about witnessing the moment his daughter discovered what courage feels like when it moves through fear. That single basket became a symbol, an early expression of the philosophy Brent had always hoped to instill in his children. That true strength doesn't come from proving others wrong, but from having the courage to show up even when you're afraid. Years later, when Caitlin Clark became a name celebrated around the world, when she shattered college records, drew millions of viewers to women's basketball, and inspired young girls to dream bigger than their environments allowed, that same philosophy still guided her. Every confident stare down a defender, every long-range three-pointer, every refusal to back down from criticism traced its roots back to that winter morning in Iowa and a father's promise whispered under his breath. The power of that moment lay not in spectacle but in simplicity, in the quiet understanding that belief, once planted, grows far beyond its original soil. Brent hadn't raised his daughter to play like a boy. He had raised her to play like herself, fearless, authentic, unyielding. In doing so, he gave her permission to be the kind of athlete and the kind of woman who doesn't wait for the world to give her space, but creates it with every step she takes. The beauty of this story isn't just in the records Caitlin would go on to break or the arenas she would fill. It's in the generational echo of that small act of courage. A little girl stepping onto a court that wasn't made for her, and in doing so, making it possible for others to step onto theirs. And perhaps that's the real victory Brent foresaw when he told her she belonged. Not the trophies or the headlines, but the thousands of young girls who, years later, would
makes her such a difficult force in the paint.
Yeah, she's got that combination of strength and more quickness than you think, right?
surprising everyone in the gymnasium that cold February morning in 1999. Little 5-year-old Caitlin Clark walked straight to the center of the court, clutching the basketball that seemed almost too big for her small hands, and began shooting. The first shot clanged off the rim. The second rolled out. The boys' laughter rippled through the crowd, a sound sharp enough to pierce even the warmest confidence. Then, from the bleachers, Brent Clark stood up, his voice echoing across the gym with quiet authority and unshakable pride. "That's my daughter," he called out, his tone steady, protective, defiant. "And she belongs on that court just as much as any of your sons." The laughter faded, the gym fell silent, and in that silence Brent continued, his words becoming both a challenge and a promise. "She's going to miss some shots, she'll make some mistakes, but she's also going to show you something about heart, about courage, and about what it means to compete with everything you have." Something shifted in that moment, in Caitlin, in the room, in the way people would remember this day for years to come. Energized by her father's faith, Caitlin steadied herself and released another shot. Swish, then another, and another. By the end of warm-ups, the teasing had stopped. The boys who had laughed now watched in reluctant admiration as this tiny girl with pigtails displayed the poise and confidence of someone twice her age. When the game began, Caitlin didn't dominate. She was still 5, after all, but she played with a kind of fearless joy that electrified the room. She dove for loose balls, took bumps from boys nearly twice her size, and shot with unapologetic confidence even when she missed. Her courage was contagious. Parents leaned forward, boys began passing her the ball, and the energy in the gym shifted from skepticism to wonder. The defining moment came late in the